Hey y'all, this is Darren Van Dam, and you are watching Flick Connection, the show that connects you with the best movies on streaming, and today we're talking about all the best stuff Netflix is going to be adding in July 2022. So if you're new to the channel, welcome, but what we do in these videos in particular is we talk about everything Netflix is adding in the upcoming month, and we start with all the stuff they're adding on the first, which is where they add most of the familiar favorites. Then we'll work our way through the rest of the month talking about all the new Netflix original stuff they're going to be adding, shows they're bringing back, ending with one of the biggest movies Netflix has released to date. At the very end of this video, I'll show you everything leaving Netflix in the month of July, so you can be sure to catch those titles before they're gone. This video is sponsored by Noom, but I'll be telling you more about them later in the video. Let's go ahead and get started with my top 10 picks out of all the familiar favorites they're adding on July 1st. John Carpenter's Vampires is far from one of his best movies, but I would consider it to be one of, if not his most underrated movie. In this movie, James Woods, of all people, plays a leather-clad vampire slayer in a fairly cheesy movie. I would say this actually has a lot in common with From Dusk Till Dawn. While I would consider that to be a superior movie, this is a cool vampire flick from the 90s. It does have a 90s edge to it. If you like vampire stuff and you never watched this underrated gem, it's going to be one of the cooler picks on Netflix this month, but it's not necessarily a solid flick all around, which is why it's my number 10 pick. I could say the same thing for my number 9 pick, Contraband, which is one of, I think, Mark Wahlberg's most underrated movies from the last 10 years or so. I mean, it's kind of a crazy heist action flick. It's got a nice hard R rating, some good twists and turns. Kate Beckinsale's in it, but you also get a really great role from Giovanni Ribisi and Ben Foster in this movie as well. Again, great heist sequences. If you never bothered, or maybe it's been a while since you watched it, this one is much better than you would expect. The Talented Mr. Ripley is one that I have loved since it released. This one's got a real vintage style. In fact, I believe they actually produced this one in Technicolor. One of only a few movies of our era to be produced in Technicolor, and it gives it this great vintage feel without really quite feeling like an old movie. This one too, it's got some great twists and turns, amazing performances from Matt Damon, Gwyneth Paltrow. Jude Law is really the standout of this movie, and then Philip Seymour Hoffman. He's not in the movie much, but he's got a really fantastic role. If you've not seen it, it's not packed with action. This is a slow-paced thriller, but it's just expertly executed. On the other end of the intensity spectrum, though, we've got Natural Born Killers. This is one of the most intense movies ever made, and not just because of the acts of violence in it, but because of the way it was shot. Oliver Stone directed this. It is by far his most chaotic, frenetic movie he's ever directed, and this was actually written by Quentin Tarantino before he was directing movies. And so it's got a great Tarantino script, and it's this amazing collaboration between Oliver Stone and Quentin Tarantino, but you've also got an amazing performance from Woody Harrelson and Juliette Lewis, who are the leads. Also an amazing role from Tom Sizemore, Tommy Lee Jones. Robert Downey Jr. is amazing in this movie, and Rodney Dangerfield. It's bonkers stuff. If you've never seen this movie, it's kind of a rite of passage if you consider yourself a movie buff, so be sure to catch it on Netflix during the month of July. I consider Catch Me If You Can to be one of Steven Spielberg's most rewatchable movies, at least ones that he's produced this century. Obviously, some of his more classic rewatchable movies are all from the 70s, 80s, and 90s, but Catch Me If You Can is a really fun ride. Obviously, Leonardo DiCaprio is really great in this movie, but also Christopher Walken and Tom Hanks and a bunch of supporting actors, and this is just a fun, really accessible movie that, again, is just highly rewatchable. I would also consider Guy Ritchie's Snatch, it's gotta be a better way to say that, to be just as rewatchable as Catch Me If You Can, if not more so. But it is my favorite Guy Ritchie movie. If you recently watched The Gentleman on Netflix, then Snatch will make a great companion to that.
Hey, look, so what's a heck of 2 roof lights? The stylish house frame furniture, and the Scar cushions with matching shag cover. Okay. Right. It's just terrible partial to the party with the blue bags.
Deliverance is getting added this month, another really intense movie, and while I know a lot of you probably remember it for the squeal like a piggy scene, which is easily one of the more memorable and more disturbing scenes from the movie, after that, this does turn into a really intense thriller that's really well directed. It's one of my favorite serious Burt Reynolds roles. and probably Jon Voight's greatest performance. I mean, this is a really solid movie that's really well directed. It's just got that one scene that's burned into our cinematic memories, but if it's been a while since you've watched the entirety of Deliverance, I'm telling you, it is top-notch stuff. Now to my top 3, which are some of the greatest movies ever made. I would put all of these in my top 20 movies ever made, starting with my number 3 pick, Boogie Nights. I consider this to be Paul Thomas Anderson's second best movie, probably Mark Wahlberg's greatest performance, and probably Burt Reynolds' second best serious performance. This has got an incredibly stacked cast, amazing soundtrack, and it is a wild ride because you go through so many different moods and emotions. Very similar to my number 1 pick on this list. There's happy, exciting times and then also really intense, dour moments. It's again a wild sort of roller coaster ride through the 70s into the 80s with some funny stuff. Again, when Mark Wahlberg and John C. Reilly are trying to make that album in this movie, it's pure comedy magic. I can't imagine there's too many people watching that have never seen this. If you have not seen it, it's incredibly graphic. It is about the porn industry in the 70s, but again, just a solid movie. Netflix is also adding David Fincher's Seven on the first, one of the greatest crime mysteries of all time, even if it's one of the darkest. And I can tell you from years of watching this movie, it absolutely holds up. The cinematography makes it look like it was filmed just yesterday. All the story plots, ins and outs, the performances, everything holds up in 2022. I promise you, if you want to watch a dark, moody mystery movie, you're not going to do any better than Seven on Netflix or any other streaming platform, really. It's one of the best ever made. And then my favorite movie of all time, longtime subscribers already know what it is, GOODFELLAS is getting added on the first. We just recently lost Ray Liotta, I think a week or 2 ago. It has not been long. Obviously, this is one of his greatest movies, probably his greatest, maybe the greatest movie from one of the greatest directors ever made, Martin Scorsese. And what I love about GOODFELLAS, I mean, there's so much to love, but one of the things I really love about this movie that you should pay attention to if you're gonna rewatch it is the 3 chapters. There's 3 completely different movies bundled up into this thing. They're all filmed differently, they have different soundtracks, and it all works. The beginning is Henry Hill's introduction into organized crime, and it's fun and it's colorful, and even when there's violence, it's a pretty movie. Then there's the Billy Bats scene, and everything takes a darker turn. Every scene is darker and heavier. And then the final third of the movie is a cocaine-fueled drug movie. The music changes, the editing style changes, it gets faster, more frenetic. Again, I'm gushing, but it's a gem of a movie. If you've never seen it, again, it is my number 1 favorite movie of all time. It's gonna be available to watch on the first. Netflix is adding a lot more on the first. I'm putting a full list of everything down in the top pinned comment, along with the dates when they're going to become available. Also on the first, though, they're going to be adding Stranger Things Season 4 Volume 2. That's right, you didn't have to wait too long. This is just really Netflix experimenting with not dumping every episode on one day. Maybe they'll go to a model where they stretch things out over weeks so there's a little more buzz on social media and things instead of just firing out a whole season at once. We'll see how it goes, but at least they're not making us wait too long for Volume 2. For those of you wondering, yes, I watch movies for a living, and yes, it's a really cool job, at least it is for me, but it also makes me a professional couch potato. And as a result, last year I was pushing 200 pounds, which was the heaviest I had ever been, so I decided to get into proper shape. I'm almost down to 170, the lightest I've been since high school, and it hasn't been easy, but today's sponsor, Noom, has made it much easier by helping me make good eating and lifestyle changes. Beyond just that number on the scale, Noom helps you improve your relation with food with psychology and cognitive behavior therapy. Noom has a bunch of really cool features, but one of my favorite ones is the little lessons that they give you. They only take a few minutes each, and they've made me much more aware of the caloric density and nutritional value of the food that I'm putting into my body. Another great thing is Noom doesn't require any extreme changes. They gradually disrupt your routine, helping you make proper decisions about what you're eating. And you don't have to eliminate anything. That means you can still eat what you want, Noom just helps you moderate your diet till you reach your goal while establishing long-lasting, sustainable routines. And your goal is up to you. It could be a number on the scale, it could be to run a 5K, it could just be to feel more confident. If you're ready to attack some weight loss, my viewers can take a free 30-second quiz at noom.com/flickconnection. There's also that link in the video description below. And it's worth noting that Noom does not just tailor a program to your specific needs and desires, they also help you set realistic goals while also creating sustainable habits that will without a doubt improve the quality of your life. Honestly, I cannot express to you with words how much better everything feels after having lost nearly 30 pounds. I mean, exercise feels better, sleep, playing with my kids, all of it feels better. And I'm talking about weight I didn't even know I needed to shed just a few years ago. Again, just go to that link in the description or just type in noom.com/flickconnection and you're gonna get a free 30-second quiz to see if it's a good fit for you. But speaking of things that are a good fit for you, let's talk about the rest of everything Netflix is gonna be adding in July. On July 4th, they add Leave No Trace, which is actually a Ben Foster drama about a man who's living off the grid with his teenage daughter. This is not some post-apocalyptic thing or anything like that. Don't be expecting an action movie. This is a really serious drama that takes place in our timeline, our reality. I don't want to speak as to why he's doing what he's doing, but if you like really intense dramas or you're a fan of Ben Foster, this is going to be a must-watch for you in July. Fans of the series Money Heist have got something new to look forward to on July 8th. The Longest Night is a new Spanish language series about a group of armed men trying to capture a serial killer at a psychiatric facility. It looks like wild, crazy action mixed with a serial killer crime series type of a thing. It looks like a really interesting mashup, and some stuff appears to be really over the top. The trailer just reminds me a lot of Money Heist, maybe a little darker and more serious though, so if you're a fan of that, again, look forward to this miniseries. And then for the whole family, they're going to be adding The Sea Beast, which is a new animated movie for kids about a giant sea monster, but this is actually from the writer-director of Moana and Big Hero 6. So for a Netflix original, it should be pretty solid stuff. If somehow you haven't got enough Chris Hemsworth lately, they're going to be adding 12 Strong on July 10th. If you ask me, this would have made a better addition on July 4th, but hey, I don't work at Netflix. Michael Shannon and Michael Pena also star in this, and it's about the first Special Forces team deployed to Afghanistan after 9/11. While I did like this movie, I felt like the writing and directing got a little sloppy and the movie ultimately fell apart, but you do get some really great actors that kind of help hold the thing together, and you also get Special Forces guys on horseback, which is kind of the main thing that sold this movie, so it's got its redeeming factors. It could have been done better, but it still is a pretty solid watch. July 11th brings Valley of the Dead. This is a zombie movie from Spain that actually takes place during or after World War II. It's got kind of a funky vibe to it. Zombie movies should be a little bit fun. This one looks like it could be particularly fun, but because zombie movies are a dime a dozen, they do have to do something unique and interesting. Hopefully this one does something unique and interesting. On the 12th, they add a couple of interesting picks, including Bill Burr live at Red Rocks. Bill Burr is one of my favorite stand-up comedians. He's easily one of the best working today. I actually saw him, I believe, back in October, so I did get to see him working on some of the material that is probably in this special. Hopefully he did include the bit about doing mushrooms for the first time. It was really funny, but that also brings me to the other thing getting added on the 12th, How to Change Your Mind with Michael Pollan. Michael Pollan is a New York Times bestseller writer. He's written a bunch of books, mostly about plants and food. Vast majority of those being diet related, our relationship with food, how it's grown, how we consume it, all that stuff. But more recently, he did a book about your brain on psychedelics. He himself experimented with a bunch of different psychedelics, so it'll be interesting to see what gets included in this Netflix program. On the 13th, they add Chips, which stars Dax Shepard and Michael Pena again. This movie was really panned critically. Maybe people were expecting it to be a really good representation of the show Chips. I'm honestly not sure why you would need that show to be turned into a movie that's just like the show, but Dax Shepard actually directed this movie, and while it is not a solid movie and not a strong recommendation, it does have funny moments, so if you just want a couple of chuckles, both of those guys are really funny, and it ends up being a fairly decent buddy movie. movie. On the 13th, they're also going to be adding DB Cooper, Where Are You?, which is a new true crime series about DB Cooper. If that name sounds familiar, but you're not sure where you heard it before, DB Cooper is a pseudonym for a person who hijacked a plane in 1971, made off with the modern day equivalent of over $1 million, parachuted out of the plane over Mexico, and was never heard from again. It was a big investigation that spanned decades, and no one ever solved this mystery. Odds are there's going to be new information in this Netflix program, but probably no real answers. Now, the 14th adds a very interesting Netflix original project, Resident Evil Season 1. Now, I have tried all of the Resident Evil movies. Some I liked okay, others I didn't like at all. Long story short, I've not been a big fan of the Resident Evil movie series. I don't feel like they represent the games very well, or at least the experience of playing the games. However, I'm not gonna lie, this Netflix series looks absolutely bonkers. It looks like it's got some wild stuff in it. Hopefully, it is a good horror action series, and it's not padded with a bunch of needless dialogue, which odds are that's probably what it is, but I would love to be wrong about this one. And then FARZAR, I think I'm saying that right, Season 1 is a new animated series that looks like another Rick and Morty knockoff. That's not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, eventually one of these Rick and Morty knockoffs has got to land and actually be good, right? Maybe not. On July 15th, they add Uncharted, starring Tom Holland and Mark Wahlberg. Again, I was a huge fan of the game series. They're some of the best action games ever made, and I'm such a dork. For years back when I was playing those games, I kept looking up on IMDb to see what was happening with this movie. It kept switching directors, casts, writers, and ultimately, I'm sad to say, they ended up with a fairly mediocre movie. Despite the fact that it's Tom Holland, Mark Wahlberg, the movie's kind of dry. It does have really great moments in it, though. There's some really fantastic moments in this movie that make it worth watching. Had I gone to the theater to see this, which I did not, I would have been really disappointed. I spent a few bucks on it at home and it was okay, but for something included on Netflix later this month, if you've been holding out, you haven't seen it yet, this will make a good watch. And then on the 22nd, they're going to be adding what is supposedly the biggest budget movie to date, apparently even bigger than Red Notice, The Gray Man.
What do you know about the Sierra program?
Reckless mystery men you guys send in when you can't officially send anyone else.
The Gray Man.
And much of that budget was probably spent on the cast because this stars Ryan Gosling, Chris Evans, and Ana de Armas, and was directed by the Russo brothers, most famous for having directed the later Avengers movies. But I'm not a frog and you're not a bunny, so let's not jump ahead. These guys also directed Cherry, which was not the greatest, so we will see what happens with The Gray Man, but the trailer looks absolutely sick. It's about a couple of CIA assassins essentially hunting each other down. It looks like it's got some great action sequences in it. Hopefully it is more than that though. I mean, we can see good action just about anywhere. Hopefully this is a really interesting story. I will say Chris Evans's character in the trailer looks particularly interesting. It's something very different from what he normally does, so at least there's that, but I'm a fan of everyone involved here, and this is shaping up to be a pretty solid flick. If you want to see it in theaters though, you will get your chance. This is going to release in select theaters about a week prior to it airing on Netflix, but as you can see, I've got a theater here, so I'm going to be watching it at home on Netflix. That is all the stuff of interest getting added in July. Here is everything leaving. Again, if you're new to the channel, the date listed is the date it is leaving, so be sure to watch it prior to that date. I have highlighted some of my top picks. These are all movies I've talked about in prior videos. Speaking of prior videos, if you're still watching, definitely consider clicking that subscribe button. I put out videos like this every single week, making sure you never run out of good movies to watch. Thanks again to Noom for sponsoring this video, and if you somehow want even more movie recommendations, go check out my website, DarrenVanDam.com. I've got some recommendations right there on the homepage, but I will keep making these videos as long as you keep watching them. Thanks for checking out this special Netflix episode, and you will see me on the next one.